You know, standing here, it feels like the ribbon of track just rolls on forever. There's a short story written by Ernest Hemingway in 1925. It's called The Battler. In The Battler, there's a main character, it's a teenager, Nick Adams, and he's thrown from a moving train. You know, he's hitched a ride on the train, and the brakeman lures him in. He says, "Hey, come here, kid, I got something for you." Nick falls forward, and wham, the brakeman hits him. The next thing Nick knows, he's landed on his hands and knees beside the track. His pants are torn, his knee is skinned up. He walks down the little embankment. There's some water, and he washes his hands, washes the dirt and the gravel out from under his fingernails. He inspects his eye. There's a lump already growing. He will have a black eye from this. Then he comes back up to the tracks. He starts to walk. He has to get to somewhere. There's just this image there that I love of this kid riding. I mean, he's going somewhere, he's moving. And then all of a sudden, suddenly he's scraped up beside the tracks and disoriented, tries to get moving again. I think of how many people have experienced things like that, where in one sentence, their life has changed and it feels like they've been thrown from a moving train. I mean, Karen awakens, the phone is ringing in the middle of the night. She grabs the alarm clock and the numerals read 3:17 in the morning. Even in a sleepy fog, she does a quick inventory in the family. Are all the kids home? And she knows as she reaches for the phone and says hello, that it is probably a wrong number or some pretty bad news. And it's not a wrong number. And she hears those 4 words that we all hate to hear. Karen, there's been an accident. Suddenly she's thrown from a train. In a single sentence, her life has changed. I don't know if you've ever experienced one of those moments where in one sentence your life changes. You hear those words, your position has been eliminated, or the cancer is malignant. We think mom's had a stroke. How soon can you make it to the hospital? Your mother and I are getting a divorce. I'm having second thoughts about the wedding. And suddenly you feel like you've been thrown from a moving train. I mean, you are hurled into the valley of the unemployed. You're thrown into the land of the suddenly single, into the language of chemotherapy or nursing home visits. Sometimes we enter the land between in a single sentence. Sometimes it's just the slow march of time. A guy's up late at night in his family room. The rest of the family's gone to bed. And he repeats the number that robs him of his sleep. The number's 3. I've sold 3 houses this year. I mean, 2 years before, the guy sold 24 homes, almost a house every 2 weeks. And now 3 houses. How much longer can I do this? How much longer can I bleed my savings and empty my retirement account in order to pay for bills in the present? You know, he's not thrown into the land between with a sudden sentence, but just month after month after month. Month after month, imperceptibly, the heart of your daughter drifts from God and drifts from you. Year after year, a marriage slowly erodes until somebody walks. But we end up in the same place, the disorienting space of the land between. All of us either have been there, we are there, or we will be there. In a broken, fallen planet, none of us are exempt from this space. And I think an important question is, what might God be pleased to do when we're in this no man's land of the land between? What might He be pleased to grow in our lives when we're in this awful waiting space? And I've received guidance in this question from looking at a story of the Israelites when they're in the wilderness. We know this era of their history as the era of the wilderness wanderings. For generations, there were slaves in Egypt. And if you looked at Egypt on a satellite map, you would see that it is green because the lush Nile River Valley, things just grew there. And the Israelites are passing through the desert, and they're headed to Canaan, the land of promise, the place that was promised to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And on a satellite map, Canaan also is green. It was called the land flowing with milk and honey. But as we check in on them today, they're not in Egypt, the land of slavery. And they are not in Canaan, the land of promise. They're in the desert. They're in the wilderness. They're in the land between. And you might be thinking, how in the world did all of those people on the move, how did they eat in that space? And the answer is that their gracious God provided this food source, this substance called manna. And the manna, the word actually meant, what is it? Because it appeared in the ground like flakes, and they would collect these flakes. They would put them in a mortar and grind them, mortar and pestle type thing, grind them, and then add water, and they would make a mush, or they would take the mush and they would bake it, and it would make cakes. And this is how they survived. This is what they ate. This is what God graciously provided for them to eat: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the next day, they'd have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the next day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if my math is right, when we open the Bible to Numbers 11, they have been eating this stuff for 2 years, and they are sick of it. Now, the manna riot that I'm about to read, I really believe that this text works better if you read it with a whiny voice. So let me read these verses to you from Numbers chapter 11. It says, the rabble with them, they began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing, and they said, if only we had meat to eat. Oh, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, oh, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now we've lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. We never eat anything but this. What is it? And they're sick of it. They're sick of eating this stuff day after day after day. And it's like their voices turn into a choir as they complain about this. Now, you might think that in the desert, nothing would grow. My friends, this is not true. The land between is fertile ground. It's fertile ground for complaint. Listen to them. They're sick of this stuff. You know, it's possible to look down on them and say, those people are babies. They whine about everything. But let me ask a question. Was there ever a season in your life where, because of financial shortage or an adventure you were on, that you ate the same food over and over and over again? I've got a close friend by the name of Kevin, and he went on this cross-country skiing adventure in the western states. And he and his buddies would cross-country ski to the base of a mountain, and then they would scale the mountain, and then they would come back down and spend the night. The next day, cross-country ski to the next mountain, summit that mountain, come back down. And Kevin told me that for a couple weeks, they ate one single meal over and over and over again. It was macaroni and cheese. Every single meal. Guess what my buddy Kevin didn't want to eat for the next 5 years? Macaroni and cheese. And so when they're complaining about the manna, just understand something. I think in stories like this, rather than placing ourselves above the characters, looking down on them, I think it's healthier to embed ourselves with the characters and kind of go, under circumstances like that, I might have done the exact same thing. Because when we're in the land between, our hearts and our spirits are in danger. And we can be prone to complaint. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of living in my in-laws' basement. I'm sick of sending out resumes and not having responses to lead to job interviews. I'm sick of visiting a mother in a nursing home that continually asks who I am. I'm sick of seeing the same marriage counselor hoping that our marriage will improve. I'm sick of getting to the end of the month and trying to decide which bills to pay and which bills not to pay. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. Listen, the land between, you would think not much would grow there. It's fertile ground, man. And one of the things that can grow is complaint. You know, I don't know about you, but when I'm going through a real distressing time in my life, I don't have to invite complaint to show up. It shows up automatically. I mean, I return home from another disappointing day, and complaint has moved into the guest room, unloaded all of its luggage, is running a load of laundry, and is rooting through my fridge for something to eat. Even as I seek to dislodge complaint, as I move its bags to the curb and change the locks on the doors, complaint sneaks back in the guest room window. Complaint resists eviction. You know, maybe you've heard the statement that good movement pushes out bad movement, and bad movement pushes out good movement. The way we keep complaint from moving back in is by inviting in another guest, and that guest is trust. We go through a hard season and we say, God, I don't like this, I don't want this, I don't understand this season, but I'll trust you. And when we invite trust in, well, when complaint tries to return, it finds that trust has already taken the guest room and is occupying the empty seat at our table. You see, trust evicts complaint. They're simply incompatible roommates. One inevitably pushes the other one out. And so as you journey through the land between, my hope for you is that God would restore your laughter and your joy. May trust grow in this difficult space.